Monday and I'm stuck in traffic. But that's okay, because I've got you here, and that means I'll never be bored. Today's words of wisdom come to us by way of the poet and mystic, Rumi, who says the following. The animal part of us that wants more and more flares and dies, feeds and sleeps. But there is an essence inside variability, always quivering with the joy of returning to the origin. Live inside that ray. A shadow diminishes or elongates. A ray is the person casting the shadow that stays the same. Oh, Rumi always has such a way with words. And by that I mean he uses words to get away from words, to the direct experiences, to the emotions and the feelings that underlie all language. He's a powerful man, and if you haven't read any Rumi, I highly recommend that you do. There are some excellent translations of his work out there by a gentleman named Coleman Barks, and like all great poets and translators, Barks manages to find the meaning behind the words, so nothing is lost in translation. If anything, it's augmented, because Barks really understands the material. Now, this quote, I think, is fairly straightforward, and to me it implies something that I've talked about many a times in these videos. You could call it the ego versus the self, the lower nature versus the higher nature. Rumi quite accurately describes this lower nature as sleeping and waking, flaring and fizzling out. It often feels this way, doesn't it, my friends? Like there's an animal part of you and something a little bit more sophisticated, and oftentimes these two elements are wrestling with each other. They're at odds. The animal wants this, the higher nature wants that, and it's a contest of seemingly separate wills that co-inhabit our minds and our hearts. It's a very strange feeling. And this reality is often expressed in the way we use language. When we talk about, I couldn't make my mind up, or I couldn't drag myself out of bed last night. It's almost like that higher nature is talking about the animal. If you've ever owned a dog, or if you own a dog now, every once in a while, for whatever reason, the dog doesn't want to go out on its morning walk. Maybe it's snowing outside. Maybe the dog's just tired today, and you have to literally put the leash on the dog and drag him out the door. Sometimes I feel like this body is that dog. Sometimes I feel like there's this animal, this ape, and then there's me somewhere in there trying to steer and guide this stupid, selfish, short-sighted beast on the right path. And this is what Rumi is talking about. The animal part is the part that wakes and sleeps, flares and fizzles. But amidst this swinging of the pendulum, there is something that is essential. Note how he words it. There is an essence inside variability. In other words, there is a constant behind all the incessant changes that represent the human mind, the human psyche, the human personality. You can call it many different things, and over the centuries, people have. They've used so many different terms for it, and so many different images and symbols to describe it. And it would seem that Rumi, like myself, believes that this essential part is the core of you, the nucleus, and it's the thing that connects you directly to the divine. Note what he says. This essence is always quivering with the joy of returning to the origin. You see, this essence gets tossed around in the psyche. It gets dragged and pushed and imprisoned and locked up. But what it craves most of all is to return to the origin, to the center, to its rightful home. And Rumi rightfully advises us to live in that center, to live in the ray. He says the shadow elongates and diminishes, but the ray is what casts the shadow, and it never changes. And that is the essential, the central, the core, the great self, the Atman. That's you. And that's me. Each one of us bears that spark that was shorn from the flint of the eternal, the divine spark that casts light. And when we dwell in the center and we bask in that light, there are no shadows. We are with God, and we are at one with all things. So find that ray and live in it. Try to spend as much time there as possible, because that's the constant. That's the concrete. That's realer than what we call reality. While all things transform and change and fade away, this is the constant. This is the thing that remains amidst all the transitions and all the variability. At least that's what Rumi thinks, and I certainly agree, but I'm not sure of anything, so if you got some insights into this, throw them at me. I'll be waiting with my catcher's mitt. Well, thanks once again for joining me. It's been a pleasure as always, and I hope to catch you on the next edition of the Daily Bread. Until then, live well, my friends.